I have somewhat of a related question, but slightly different. I am so on a few properties that I own, I got the tax appraisals in, and those numbers have skyrocketed.
Mhm.
And uh, since this is my first time going through that, I'd like to pick your brain on how have you, and maybe you haven't needed to either challenge or whatnot in the past because the appraisals haven't skyrocketed like they have now. But some of the numbers that I'm getting back won't change my principal, but my escrow is now going to go up, and so
Right,
again, my monthly cash flow goes down.
right.
Can you talk through if you've challenged appraisals before, or what you kind of think about that process when appraisal values go up, which would result in escrow increase?
Yeah. So whenever we talk about, inflation or even market growth and seeing the rent prices go up, this is one of the main reasons rent prices go up, because tax values change and landlords pass that on to the renter. Right. So the renter is actually the one that ends up paying it. Um, but your question is well received, which is, how do I deal with this? Is there any recourse that I've got? And the answer is yes. You're going to get your. In fact, I've got my stack on my counter over here, or on the coffee table over here, of appraisals, and some of them are still dirt cheap. I've got a $150,000 house. The appraisal's like $24,000 or something like that. I'm probably not going to get anything on that, right? I might submit that to a tax protest organization to protest for me in case they could get it lower, but I'm probably not going to get much on that. Now, if I just bought a house at 130 and it's listed at 110 as its tax assessment, you could probably get some savings there. And so what your approach would be is to protest those taxes. And a lot of people say, well, I don't want to go through the headache of like going through and building a case myself and protesting the taxes myself and learning that whole process. I offload that. I think you 100% should protest your taxes because it's all upside. Most of these tax protest organizations essentially say, hey, give us the address for your property. And if you've got any recent pictures, usually they take like 10. If you got any recent pictures, send some pictures over of the quality of the property, and we'll put together a case. And what they do is they look through the information on that property and how the current tax is assessed and what value it comes in at. And then they say, is there any way that we can make an argument that this house is worth less? And if they can make a good argument, given multiple different pieces, they will. And at the end of the day, for every dollar that they save you, they get 40 cents. And so let's say your tax bill is now, $3,000, right? And they are able to trim it down to $2,500. They saved you $500. They get 40% of that. All right. So they made a cool, $120 or whatever it is, 220, whatever. So that's essentially how they make money and how they protect you as well. So their cases could essentially be, it could be, hey, well, this property is only renting for $600 a month. And so it could reasonably only be worth $60,000, right? They might go that route. Or if you're renting it for $1,500 a month, they might say, well, there's this house across the street that just sold for $50,000. It's a similar floor plan, similar size, but it's just in like much less quality of shape, right? But they're using it as kind of like a sagging comp, right? They'll do that, right? That's the motivation that you want them to have, is to be able to go to bat for you. And so I think it's great. And you don't pay unless they make you money. And so I offload all of that to them. I think it's incredibly valuable. I've used Texas Tax Protest in the past. And it's probably specific to your state, but there are multiple organizations out there that I think are helpful for this.
Awesome. Yeah, my next question was going to be who you've used, because the people that I've used on my primary only focus on my and some surrounding counties, and they don't focus in my target market. So hearing Texas tax protests or whatnot, maybe that's one that I can look into to see if they service my market and go from there. That's helpful.
Yeah,
Thanks.
yeah, that's a good question. Because another thing is, every year that they keep your taxes down, it means that your compare is lower in the future.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So even if you pay them 40% next year, if they're going to, the example that I used, instead of you being at 3,000, now you're at 2,500. If they were going to jump you to, 5,000, that would be doubling instead of just, going up, what is it, 60% or something like that. Right. So then their argument is, you're going to double the taxes on this property. The value of this property has not doubled. So how can you double the taxes on this property? Right. So they will use that compare as well too. They're essentially picking whichever argument is strongest, which is what we do with comps. Right. All right. We're picking the strongest argument that communicates the best, highest value of our property. And when we're doing comps, we want it to be the prettiest, most beautiful thing. I've seen memes like this where it's, how I view my house. It looks like, a house with money coming out of it, right? How I want the bank to view my house. It's gorgeous. It's a mansion. How I want the tax appraiser to view my house. It's like, a hole in the ground, basically, like things like that, and it's true. That's how you want it to be viewed.
Yeah. My thought process is, if I have a $3,000 bill and they get it down to 2,500 and then take 40%, I'm paying them $200, I'm all in at 27 versus $3,000. I still make money, or I still save money.
Right.
And so I love the idea of protesting the taxes, but a lot of the groups I've been searching around that have this service, maybe my Google searches are pinging off my IP address and where I'm locally at, because I'm like, no, I need something that doesn't service where I'm at.
Right.
So even hearing just Texas tax protest.
I mean, you could search tax protest in West Texas, tax protest Abilene, Texas, or tax protest. Insert your market there. I think that's something helpful to do. I also noticed I think you posted on the Abilene group, and so we'll see what response you get there.
Yeah, dude, and this is a very cool question. You don't have to go into much detail on it, but do you see any value? And maybe you just haven't experienced it, but I'll ask. Do you see any value in using a Texas-based protest group versus a national-based protest group? Do you think there's any major value differences?
Yeah, that's a good question. I could see a local tax protest group being able to speak more of the language of the market. And give a different perspective relative to what's true in that market. So that's one piece. But the other piece is, if someone does across the nation, you'd imagine they've got a pretty strong backing, right? So their legal approach to it is probably more systematized for them to be able to grow to that size. So that's a good question. I would ask them success rate. If you're talking to two, like, how often do you save people money? If it's 70% over here and it's 40% over here, that's a data point. Well, on average, how much, what percentage of their taxes do you save them? And if it's 40% over here and they save them 50% of taxes versus 70% over here and they save them 10% of their taxes, and then you've just got to make a decision, like, what do I think is best for me? But I think those are some helpful questions to ask.
Yeah, it is. And I hadn't thought about them. I asked the question because whenever I did some Googling and stuff, ads or like sponsored results or whatnot were at the top. There's like all national,
right? Yeah.
Protesters. And I was like, well, I think I want something more local for the reasons you mentioned, but I hadn't given some credit to the national aspect, that maybe their legal team is more impactful, or holds a little bit.
Or they've got a better system, right? Or they just plug it in and there's some IP that just says boom, here's your information, right?
Yeah. Okay, awesome, thanks.
Cool. Great question.